estate purchase contract. Where do we last leave off?
Number 8.
Point 8, yeah.
Okay, we definitely gotta do this faster. All right. Due diligence, these are probably the clauses that we discuss the most, so let's understand them. Buyer's conditions of purchase. So Carol, 8.1, can you read that first paragraph?
Okay, buyer's obligation to purchase the property is, or is not, conditioned upon buyer's due diligence, as defined in section 1.8A below. This condition is referred to as the due diligence condition. If checked in the affirmative, sections 8.1A through 8.1C apply, otherwise they do not.
All right, so when you're reviewing contracts, these is or is not on all these conditions, whether it's due diligence, appraisal, and financing, are the key factor. So when would you mark is not?
It's cash buyer.
I wouldn't do it with.
I almost would never.
I don't think I'd ever do it. I don't know, the situation.
I've always
would
worked is to
mark it.
Unless
New
it,
construction?
okay, so like,
That's
Yeah.
usually different.
one home we looked at right now, it's yesterday, we're thinking about making an offer on. It's one of those business moves, so their company bought their home when the company transferred him. And specifically, in the remarks, it says, must mark as is condition.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that would be maybe the only, but I would still never do it as far as the due diligence, because you still have the right to back out, because you could still buy it as is, but if something huge comes up during due diligence, you can still just back out and get your earnest money.
That's, Carol brings up an interesting clause, which is that as is. The fact is you actually do buy the house as is. So people say, well, I'm not gonna do anything. I want you to tell them that we're selling it as is. And I said, well, that's funny you say that, because that's exactly what the contract says. Like, the way we wrote it up and the way they accepted it. They accepted the house as it is when they first toured it. That means you can't make it worse, but you don't also have to improve it at all. But what happens, though, is, well, let's just talk about what happens, is that people, the due diligence is usually you have to clarify with the people. Well, due diligence means inspections, like you get to check it out more, walk it in, kick the tires, and just.
And if something comes up, you can renegotiate, but sellers can always say no.
So usually what happens is during the due diligence, I'll just say DD, there's an inspection, and that inspection brings up items that need repair. You know, if even new houses aren't perfect, you know, when people do those final walkthroughs, it's like blue tape everywhere. Like, oh, there's a scuff here, you scratch that cabinet, you know. No house is perfect, not even new houses. So there's always something, and when you hire a person whose sole purpose is to find out what's wrong with the house, he's gonna find it. And then they produce a 30-page report and give it to you. All right, so when someone says, I wanna sell it as is, what they're saying is, like, I'm not motivated to repair anything. So, but you don't have to, like, I've had people write up an addendum that says, we are selling the house as is. Like, you don't have to say that. All you have to do is verbally communicate. I just want to let you know that you have the right to an inspection, but we're not gonna do anything. I'm just telling you up front. Because that's basically what the seller's saying. It's like my seller doesn't have the appetite, doesn't have the motive, doesn't have the money, whatever.
And we've already priced it accordingly.
We've priced it accordingly. You're buying it at the discounted price. So on my listing, the thing is like, you know, we give these people a low price, and that's exactly what my seller said. Look, I'm only agreeing to this price because I am not going to fix anything. So you just tell them that when they go through, like, I'm not going to do much. Like they can't come and ask me for a new heater or fix the roof. Like, I'm not going to do it. They got the price for that reason. And you know what every buyer says? Oh, I understand. That's great. And you know
Fix
what?
the roof?
And yeah, you know what happens after they get that inspection report? oh my gosh, you know, and then they write in addendum says items 1 through 10 that you need to fix. And you're like, I thought we had a discussion that, anyways, it's kind of funny, but like seriously, like that's how it is. So, if people waive their due diligence, that's completely different, because now they're waiving the right to backing out of the contract. They can still inspect the home. So waiving your due diligence doesn't waive the right to check out the home. It just waives the right to back out of the home.
So the only time I would ever do that is if my client said, I want this property no matter what, we're in a multiple bidding war,
Yeah.
let's just get it done.
Yeah.
Make the offer more appealing.
And
It's like
and
the most
usually they're
important
paying
thing
cash,
you should do, I
and
guess.
usually they're paying cash, they're a contractor, they've already walked the property and done their own inspection. And it's part of a negotiating tactic, just to make our offer stronger.
But that's super rare that would ever,
Yeah,
like,
So you've done it before?
yeah.
Well, our particular house that I just got under contract, like the guy that put the offer in had already toured it 3 times and once with the contractor before we made the offer. So when I look at what most people do for due diligence and inspections, like he did more than most people
Upfront.
up front. And so sometimes in those cases, yeah, if you feel confident enough, you can just waive the inspection. And then, you know, if you give an insane good offer, like, yeah. Or here's another one. The house is a dump. You already know it's a dump. Like, you don't have to inspect it. You know it's
They're
crap.
buying it as an investment flip property.
And
You're
gonna close it.
it's the short sale. It's the foreclosure where you are buying it, to use the term again, as is. Like literally,
As
you know
is,
the
where
bank.
is.
You know the bank's not going to do anything, and basically the bank makes you sign like every release liability form in the known, or you know they don't know thing about the condition. The house is crap, and you're buying it as crap, and and if you want to know anything about the house, it's really you're just offering a price based off of your intuition or your knowledge about the property. Like, oh, I know the house needs a new roof. I know it needs new everything. So, you know, you do your little calculations and you give them a price, but then you may have to go higher if there's a lot of competition. But definitely in real foreclosure scenarios, you buy the house without even seeing it. Like, because real foreclosures are on the steps of the courthouse, and you have to pay cash. You have to literally write a check right there, but you get it at a discount. But you run the risk of not truly knowing what the house is worth, or, you know, you can know ahead of time the address, you look it up, you try and do research, but
They
when you're
don't
on the
usually
county
let you in.
steps, there is no good negotiation. You just buy it cash as is, and they transfer the deal over to you.
And you have to take care of any liens.
Yeah, and then the liens wipe out because of the foreclosure. Well, anyhow, that's usually when you do it, but outside of that, in 95% of the cases, we're gonna do some sort of inspection. Now, it doesn't have to be long. What's our typical period for an inspection?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. You know, like in commercial properties, it could be 3 months. Because, you know, you're checking
250 units.
Yeah, you're checking 250 units. When we bought one, I remember going out, and we were in Colorado looking at an apartment complex. And I personally walked through over 200 units. Took us like 16 hours to walk through like all these units, but one by one. Just literally, we had a paper for every unit. We walked in, and like I had somebody else with me, and we just went, okay, you know, it's like our checklist, like countertops, you know,
Stove,
refrigerator,
fridge.
stove, like all these items like damage, and I would just make notes. And then he would look at carpet, HVAC, you know, testing all that. And so we just take a few minutes each one, and then next one, and the next one. Just took forever. But the due diligence is much, much more. So probably 200 houses. All right, so let's read what the due diligence allows us to do in section A of the due diligence.
Oh, due diligence items. Buyer's due diligence shall consist of buyer's review and approval of the contents of the seller's disclosures referenced in section 7, and any other tests, evaluations, and verifications of the property deemed necessary or appropriate by a buyer, such as the physical condition of the property, the existence of any hazardous whatever, substances, environmental issues or geologic conditions, the square footage or acreage of the land and or improvements, the condition of the roof, walls, and foundation, the condition of the plumbing, electrical, mechanical, heating and air, conditioning systems and fixtures, the condition of all appliances, the cost and availability of homeowners insurance and flood insurance if applicable, water source, availability and quality, the location of property lines, regulatory use restrictions or violations, fees for services such as HOA dues, municipal services, and utility costs, convicted sex offenders residing in proximity to the property, and any other matters deemed material to buyer in making a decision to purchase the property. Unless otherwise provided in the Rep C, all of buyer's due diligence shall be paid for by buyer and shall be conducted by individuals or entities of buyer's choice. Seller agrees to cooperate with buyer's due diligence. Buyer agrees to pay for any damage to the property resulting from any such inspections or tests during the due diligence time.
Covered them. Most
a
things,
lot.
right?
So do you read this stuff to them?
No.
Well, technically our buyer is supposed to read the agreement. Do we even read it? You know,
I didn't know
mostly
that
not.
sex offenders was on there. I don't think
Yeah,
you
I
disclose
didn't know.
that. That's
No, you
interesting.
don't have to disclose
No,
that.
Or
this
the
is
se-
saying that they can know.
That's their
and
right.
Find
Oh, if
out,
they
and
find
that
out,
could be
yeah.
a reason.
So
for
you can't
finding out.
say, if you
buyers-
said, I can't believe you're canceling because like guy 3 blocks down is a sex offender, come on.
You can do that.
That's, it. You know, this is left intentionally broad enough to where they can pretty much cancel for any reason.
And they don't have to tell you.
Yeah.
You know, I decided I don't like the gray color of your house. I've always wanted a yellow house, and just occurred to me that I really don't like that gray.
And I don't wanna pay.
My cat doesn't like that.
My cat,
I mean,
yeah.
It's anything.
I was totally for it until I brought my cat in, and
She
the
didn't,
way
she didn't wanna walk in.
she
so-
I got my crystal
hissed
ball and
was
yeah.
like, it doesn't really matter, so.
But it's a buyer beware state. Tracy, she called me, they had, seller. She was there during the inspection and he wasn't a real inspector, he was just like, kinda like
A
walked
guy.
through the house. And she was like concerned, she's like, well, you know, don't they want like a real inspector? I'm like, that's not our problem, that's up to them. They were too cheap to hire a real inspector, and that's on them.
It's worth it to do that.
Don't say anything.
No, do whatever.
Okay, so if you're the listing agent, the main phrase here is seller agrees to cooperate.
Yeah, so they're gonna allow them in.
That means you have to allow them in. You can't say, you know what, I don't want you there when I'm not there, I'm doing my hair today, we're on vacation, I don't want anybody in the house when I'm on vacation, you know, and that's like a week of their due diligence, you can't do that. You have to let them in.
Mm.
Or you're impeding the contract, you're obstructing the contract and you're in breach of contract. So you have to cooperate. That's a listing agent, that's what you have to tell them. I don't like this radon thing like in the middle of my house. Or this guy was like swabbing my walls. What was that for? A meth test? So offended. So here's the other thing. This is very important too. Buyer agrees to pay for any damages to the property resulting from such inspections. It's like, what if a home inspector goes up into the attic and falls through? Who's the liable one?
Buyer.
Well, first the home inspector, he should have, now,
We have
that's
insurance
why
for
you
that.
buy a home inspector with insurance. But if you hired a friend who's a contractor who fell through your wall, well, the buyer's gonna pay for that.
Mm.
So just realize it, that hiring a reputable company with insurance covers the damages that may result, you know? And I've seen some little damages like, oh, I just broke that little thingy. Sorry, I'll get that fixed. Okay? So now we'll read section B, which is the buyer's right to cancel or resolve objections.
You want me to do it?
Yep.
If buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion that the results of the due diligence are unacceptable, buyer may either no later than due diligence deadline referenced in section 24B, cancel the rep C by providing written notice to seller, whereupon the earnest money deposit shall be released to buyer without the requirement of further written authorization from seller. Or no later than the due diligence deadline referenced in section 24B, resolve in writing with seller any objections buyer has arising from buyer's due diligence.
So you don't even need the seller's signature on that, just send it over.
I think.
Oh,
that's-
for the earnest money?
Yeah, if it's in the broker's trust account.
Yes,
No.
If
if
it's,
it's in a title. then
if it's at a title company, that's the downside of a title company, is that you do have to have seller's authorization to release. the
One time I
funds.
accidentally took it to the title company instead.
I've seen more and more listings that specifically state you have to use through brokerage, not a title company.
I've seen that too.
So I
Now I
think
know
it's
what that
becoming a
means.
problem.
They can tie
Well,
things up.
I think a lot of the brokerages that are low-service brokerages don't wanna handle it. They're like, just deposit and tell us
Yeah.
when you've got it, because they don't wanna handle the money, because then they have to do extra work.
Yeah,
You know, if they have 100 agents doing deals, again, it's get what you pay for, so they don't wanna do the work, so they're gonna make you to do all the deposits, provide proof, and then, but from a listing, or from a buyer's point of view, it does create more problems, because now if there's a dispute, like if you canceled and you canceled before the deadline, let's say it was at 4:50, and they're upset that you canceled right at the deadline, but you know you have verification that it is, you don't have to get their permission to get your money back. Whereas if it's at a title company, you do. And if they're disputing it all, they're not gonna sign your paper until they get, so you can see how it's
Past due
gonna,
diligence.
They
it's
have
gonna
more
bring
power.
up, yeah, it's gonna give them more power.
So the resolving any, let's see, resolve in writing with seller any
That's good,
objections
yeah.
buyer has
Thanks.
arising with buyer's due diligence. One of my deals I had that we were getting close to our due diligence deadline, and they weren't responding to us. And so that that violates this seller agrees to cooperate with buyer's due diligence, I think. That's
They're not
something.
responding to what?
They weren't, we were trying to get, some repairs and things, because we have to do it before due diligence, we were asking for stuff
Yeah.
like that.
and then they weren't
And
responding.
they weren't responding. It was our favorite brokers that doesn't get
Yeah,
back to
so
people, but.
basically that was a no then.
Well,
The
they did, no, they
nonverbal
came
no.
back and did it, and this was at the beginning. I literally couldn't get a hold of the agent, and this was, I was a new agent, so I didn't know totally, but this was wrong, but I talked to the seller
Yeah.
directly, and they worked it out with me. Because I couldn't get a hold of,
Yeah,
The
that's
agent.
that's a bad representation.
So
So-
if something does happen, do you usually just call the broker? Like, should he have called the broker versus dealing with the seller? Or-
there's no way to get a hold of that, it was a homie deal, so I don't,
Oh,
and this was at the beginning of, this was like a year and a half ago, so it's
before
like,
they start getting a little bit better.
yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, you go to the next level up, I guess, just go to the broker, I mean, and then they'll probably get you in touch with the seller. But it is, remember, if you're dealing with homie, that's a facilitated for sale by owner, it's not really a listing. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, they're expecting the owner to deal with those issues.
That sounds like.
But they got mad at me for talking to him,
Oh,
because we
homie got mad at
extended.
you?
Yeah, we extended the due diligence. The seller was like, yeah, they'll do that, extend the due diligence. Because I had half the earnest money going hard at the due diligence. But
Yeah.
anyways,
Well, you're like, then answer me.
I know, I was like, I didn't hear back from them for like 2 days.
Well,
He usually.
so on a normal house, I say normal is in that normal price range. If on a larger house or on a more complex property, you may want more time, but generally, you see most contracts at 2 weeks. The thing is like, okay, this is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 days. So you have Saturdays and Sundays in here. So let's say this is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay, most of the time they don't get things done on Saturdays and Sundays. So that knocks you down to really 10 business days. And the problem
And
is
if
that
there's a holiday.
sometimes like you go under contract on this day, and then let's say this
They
is
order the
Labor Day, right? And they may not take action immediately, and so all of a sudden you go to here, and then they
Inspection.
order the inspection on that day,
And then they're all backed up from Labor Day.
and then
so
they're
it's-
backed up till this day at the earliest, and then you meet them at 3 p.m. They get you that report, they get everything done by 6 p.m. And now we talk about it. And then I'm on top of it, so I submit it right then. But then it's a Saturday, Sunday.
We hear back from them Monday.
We hear back, yeah, Monday.
They negotiate.
Monday they counter. We counter, accept. And you're just like, all of a sudden it's like the very last day. You're like, oh, why is this so stressful?
I know.
Okay? What I teach you is how to take stress out of it. I always tell people, please act now. Like now. You think you have a lot of time,
You really don't.
but you really don't. So, in another scenario, what happens is that you order it here. Let's say it was a holiday, there's nothing you can do about it. So maybe they could do it here.
No.
Like, if they did, that'd be awesome. But you're still gonna,
Usually it's still gonna be, they're gonna maybe do it the Tuesday, there you go.
yeah. So it would happen here. So they do the inspection, right? And then, but you do it at 9 a.m. And then by 2 p.m. you sent over the counter for repairs. Okay. Now they can talk about it, and then you're still going to go through the counter offer, and then, maybe acceptance on that day. And now you have several days to work out something. But what usually happens is, let's say, let me give you another scenario that can happen. Is, let's say you act quickly, so you order it and they do it. So they do the inspection, but they're going to leave a radon test. And then the meth, right?
And then it takes.
So the meth, in order to get it back, you have to pay extra to get it back within, do you remember what was the time? It's like a week. So you're gonna be like, you're not gonna get your meth test until here. The radon test is gonna take, it's like 3 days or something, 4 days.
It's 4 days.
4 days, but then it's a Sunday, so they're gonna pick it up on Monday.
You're back where you started.
And then you have the inspection. Sure, the inspection's done, so you kind of know your items. But typically, when you do an inspection, you don't want to piecemeal the repair inspection. Like, hey, we just found out that your roof's leaking. Can you fix that? Yeah, we'll fix that. 5 days later, oh,
And the radon test.
the radon's high too.
And now.
And then 2 days after that, you
Meth.
got positive meth.
It's better just to hit them all in one addendum.
Well, and it's also helpful for your client to see the whole picture of what they're, it's like, hey, you're getting married. Oh, by the way, she was unfaithful to you. Okay. Oh, by the way,
Twice.
her teeth are crooked.
3 times.
Oh, by the way, it's like, yeah, it's like,
She has a lot
she's
of
unfaithful
debt.
1 time, twice, 3 times. Okay, that was, so, it gets almost overwhelming. Like, as an agent, you're like, okay, we still have a deal. It's like dead. And then they're backing out. And so even when you get the meth test back, if you get positive meth, almost always you're gonna have to extend the acceptance period. Because what they're gonna do is meth takes three spots in the house where they'll swab it, swab, and then they take an average of those 3, and they'll come up with a meth.
What's the remedy for that?
You have to clean it really,
Clean,
really
scrub
good.
everything down.
Usually you have to
solution.
replace carpets and scrub
Repaint.
all the walls down.
And then
Kills.
repaint, or,
The honest truth is if you repaint, I think
It
would
gets
cover
trapped.
most of it.
It gets
But-
trapped under, yeah, well, they said some of it gets trapped too if you repaint it.
but if you
So sometimes you have
scrub
to
it
scrub.
after you scrub it,
Then you
then
can repaint,
do you
correct.
repaint?
Yes.
You do like it's a huge remedy.
I don't know, practically and hazmat wise, like, they treat it like a
They want
dangerous
you-
chemical and it costs a lot of money because they literally wear like hazmat suits when they clean. But, I mean, I personally had a seller clean it, but that's another story.
And it came back fine
Uh-huh.
after.
Mhm.
So,
As long as you know the solution, you can do it yourself.
so, and you can buy kits online,
Yeah.
but technically, according to the health department, they'll condemn your house at that point. We should have there's whole meth classes, so go to UCAR and have one of them.
Actually, the lady came to the Blues Barbecue thing on
Oh, yeah?
Saturday. She was there the last day. I said, hey, I was in your class. You did good class.
The lady that does the classes all
Got
the
her half a
time.
bison. It's a nice lady.
Okay, well, usually what you do after that point, you're gonna have to have, you can check every room, check all rooms. And then they won't do an average test, they'll do a test for all rooms. And then you can see, cause when you have to clean up your house, you have to see, is it in the whole house, or was it just like
Leakage.
the renters in the basement smoked in this one room? And so that's what you'll have to find out. And so whenever you think about cleaning the house, it can be very expensive, so you don't wanna clean every part of the house. So, but that's gonna take, a few more days, and then you're gonna have to schedule with the people. And anyways, you're gonna have to extend the whole contract if you ever get meth.
2 weeks.
But, so in some sense, 2 weeks is rushed, if you really think about it.
It is.
But what, most people only hire the inspection. They get a home inspector and they pay for the cheapest service. What was the stat, you guys probably know, is, what is it, 1/3 of all houses are positive radon tested
In Utah?
in Utah?
Yeah, it's something.
It's pretty high, I
It's
mean,
high.
that's statistically high.
Yeah.
And some areas are definitely like all the houses, just in certain areas. It seems
Up on the
like.
hills, I think it's a lot
It's
worse.
just everywhere. I know my house had the highest test I've ever seen. It was 27 instead of 3. It was 3s, right? Is the
I thought it was
Four.
four, under four.
4. Yeah, 4. So yeah, pretty high. But the guy that owned the house was a doctor. He says, "Yeah, we haven't died." It's like.
You're gonna have cancer now.
Not yet.
Anyhow, I'm not here to debate whether the what's safe and not safe. I'm just saying we just have to know the law, and it's stigmatized at that point, or it's legally you legally have to disclose
Disclose it.
at that point. Okay. Now, an interesting thing is like meth, I believe, is if it's like 1 micro, blah blah blah. But I think the number is 1. If you're above like 1. So, but what if you're 0.75? Do you have to disclose?
No.
No. What if your radon's 0.39? Do you have to disclose?
No.
No. Because it's not the legal limit.
Well, it's considered like there's no radon in the house.
Right. It's considered clean. So yeah, you're fine. But it's up to, so if you're the listing agent and they had just cleaned the house for meth, once it's clean and it's retested and it's shown that it's clean, you don't have to disclose because it's remedied. It's not like water damage where you have to say, yeah, well, there was a leak, we fixed it. If you fix the meth, you don't have to disclose it. Whereas if there was water damage, you still have to disclose previous water damage.
Well,
Little interesting.
after they clean up the house, do they do another test to make sure that it's clean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then at that point, there's no mess.
That's when they officially give you the stamp of approval. So your due diligence is very important, and the problem, I always get worried, like you should, if you want to stress early, because if they start delaying this, you need to call them every day and tell them how important it is to act.
We had one cash closing that we were closing in 2 weeks, and so it was really.
Ooh, yeah.
Because what you're missing is what they don't really remember is that there has to be time to negotiate those items. or it may warrant further inspection. So your home inspector notices a lot of wood rot, and they bring it up to you, and so then you decide that you need to do a termite inspection, because it has evidence of potential termites. And so everything could take a few more days and a few more days.
And I just remember that you did say that we need to send that due diligence paper to them.
Yes. Yeah, so we have because of a lot of people feeling like they weren't told by their agent what they needed to really do, they actually have a form that we're required to get signed. It's the due diligence checklist.
Yeah, we put everything we can.
And the
And
To them.
that one, I found that I have to explain to my clients always, like, cause they'll be like, wait, does this mean that there's meth in the house? They'll be like looking through it. Or does
These are all
this
the
mean
possible
that
things
this?
you could check
And then you have to, yeah.
Yeah, so
Protects them.
if you send it over with the contract and you get them to sign the wire fraud, you get them to sign the due diligence and the contract and everything at the same time, and your buyer agreement, and they're not reading through all those things. And even if they did, we've just spent, this is our 3rd hour on the rep C, and we're on item like 8, 3 hours later. Okay, so when you talk about legal matters, it takes a lot of understanding to really understand what the contract's even saying. But you can get them to sign it just to cover the legality, but you really haven't done your fair effort as an agent to help them understand what's really going on. So getting them to sign it is not the point. I mean, legally it does cover you, but it's like shame on them. But as a good agent, you have to sit down and say, okay, look, you signed this earlier, but I'm emailing it to you right now because we're at the due diligence. Let me just review it with you. You can do it over the phone. Okay,
And you just kind of basically read, right? Because you don't want to give yourself
Well,
your opinion on this.
I don't read it. I usually say everything listed here is pretty much most everything that anybody would want to do or need to do on a property. It doesn't mean they apply to every property. Some is more towards land, but if you feel you need to do a soil sample to see if the land's been contaminated, that's completely within your right. I'm not going to be here to tell you no. I'm just here to advise you what you can do, not what you should do. Most people, though, I'll say, start with a home inspection. And then they can hire the home inspector to do several of these other items, like radon, meth, termites. And then, depending on what they find, we can go from there. That's usually how I'll pitch it. But totally up to you. So what would you like to do? I think I'd like to do a home inspector. Okay, can I make a recommendation, or would you like to look them up? Who would you recommend? All right, we'd like Pillar to Post because they're insured, they're the most consistent, professional, and they produce a nice report. Well, how much do they cost? They could be.
Depends on what you order.
Depends on what you order, get different packages.
You could be well over $1,000 depending on items,
300 to 500.
But they're not the cheapest, I'll just tell you that. But they're insured and they're consistent and they're good. And so maybe it's worth saying, the home inspector laws in the state are, anybody can basically say they're a home inspector. There's no actual licensing for it. There's some accepted standards that they're trying to do, and that's what this company adheres to, but most other guys could just be some guy that says he's a handyman that will do it, and he's not gonna produce, you can get into that whole thing. Okay, so it's important. Due diligence is the #1 reason why people cancel. It's the second negotiation of like over half the probably 2/3 of the contract easily. You always renegotiate. It's almost like standard acceptance that they're gonna ask for something. If you don't get asked for something, you're like, whew, wow, that was good. You must have a really nice house.
Do they have this in Spanish, this website?
No, all state forms are in English. Yep. And you have to sign the English one. You can't translate it yourself and sign it in Spanish. If you want to translate it,
I would just have
You
to
take
kind
on
of
the
read it in
liability.
Spanish. Yeah, I know. I almost don't even want to read this. to them in spin as I go.
Well, there are translation services, again.
I guess they can put it into Google and they can just see it, do it themselves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a Chinese guy have to sign this, and he didn't speak English at all.
He can use his phone and just translate it.
I don't know, he had his daughter, I think, help him. But he
Sir.
was, I never met him, he was actually in
In-
China
Remember, in any contract scenario,
on a cash deal.
in any contract scenario, there's three possible outcomes. They can accept, reject, or counter. Accept, reject, or counter. So they can, you can ask for everything on that inspection list, doesn't mean you're gonna get it. But, and in my last one, I fought back with a little bit for them, they got mad at me. But I was just like, you guys were like literally going through like the entire inspection report, A to Z, and asking for every line item. Like there are certain things with a 30-year-old house that generally you don't ask for. It's not a new house, so stop. Anyways, but they didn't agree with me. So I still
Were
have.
these your buyers or?
Yeah, so I have to be careful as an agent disagreeing with them. I'm an advisor. That's what an agent is. I'm an advisor. It's ultimately their decision, even if I think it's stupid.
They've had multiple offers. If we ask for too much, they'll probably just go with the second offer.
Yeah, there's already a backup written. As far as I know, I think it's above our asking price, so how much do you want to mess around with this? Well, you're going to be in those situations. So like, let's say on the inspection report there were 10 items, and they asked for all 10. Sometimes what we say is, well, which ones are the most expensive? Which ones are the most important? Like a hole in the roof, important.
Leaky faucet.
Scratch on the wood, not as important. There's just certain things that are so if so you prioritize the list. Put priority to it. Even if they still want to write up all 10, prioritize it. So that when you're in negotiations, you know what if they're going to give and take what's most important to your clients. So if you're only going to get 3 of the items, make sure they're the top 3. That'll help you get close. Now that's probably common sense that you're going to take the most expensive items and ask for those. But sometimes the seller isn't willing to replace the roof. Like, you have this phrase, it's at the end of, it's something like useful life. That's probably not the exact phrase. But they say, the water heater works, but it's at the end of its useful life.
They say that a lot.
The HVAC works, but it's at the end of its useful life. Hey, the roof is not leaking, but I do see the fibers, and it's probably less than 2 years away from being needed to be replaced. Right? Those are the things that they say. So, as a client, they're like, "Oh man, I don't want to have to replace the roof in 2 years." And the seller's like, "Dude, it's not leaking." But I don't want to have to replace it in 2 years. So what's the solution? Who's right? Well, they're both right. But who's going to pay?
You have to come to terms.
Yeah.
That's what negotiation
This
is
is
all
what
about.
negotiation's all about. Every deal's going to be different. But as an agent, you have to think through those things. Like, okay, would that scare you if you were buying a house that needed a new roof, but it wasn't leaking? But you're trusting your home inspector, and sometimes, that's
Some
where
home
some
inspectors-
home inspectors they just kill you when they're like, yeah, you need to replace the roof. Was it leaking? No, but it's in bad shape.
But by the way,
It's
here's
in
my
back-
card
so-
because I do that.
So yeah, exactly. I'm a contractor. So they can scare the bejeebas out of your client because of what they say. I had an inspector who looked at my house and he's like, "Oh my, your house has gray piping in it. Did you know?" I think it was in the late '80s. They banned that kind of pipe because it had it had lots of leaks and issues. And not only do you have great piping, you've had it for 30 years already. He freaked me out. I'm like, I have no great piping? What? Anyways, So, and then I had this positive radon test. So I'm coming back to the seller on my own house. I'm like, dude, radon's like sky high. And I got a bid and it was really high to fix it. And then your gray piping's scaring the heck out of me. He's like, look, we've been in the house for 10 years. We haven't had one problem with the piping. I'm a doctor. I live in the basement. I'm not dead. I don't have cancer. You know, that's his approach. And I'm like, I'm scared. I'm buying this expensive house. And, you know, if anything goes wrong, I don't have money to fix it. I'm spending all my money to get it, right? You know the feeling when you're scared. And so he ultimately was like, okay, fine. And we got a $7,500 price reduction for the two. He's like, that's it. It's like, I don't like to be pushed, but you've pushed me about as far as I can be pushed. Okay, sorry, but I'm just freaked out. All right.
So Eddie's so grateful now, because then the market crashed like 2 years
Yeah,
later.
yeah. And then he would've, if he kept on to it, he would have lost even more. But that's negotiation. There's a lot of emotion in negotiation. There's the seller's right and your buyer's right. They're both right. Unless it's obvious, the roof is leaking. How do you know? I don't see any water coming through. Well, we went into the attic, we had a moisture gun, and it's not a big leak, but it's seeping through, and we're just in a drier state, so it was just happened. Lucky that we came on a rainy day, and we could see it. You know, half the time I think roof leaks aren't caught because it doesn't rain much here, so, you know, throughout the entire summer, you're not really gonna catch a roof leak. So it's important to note those things. Yeah, so I got credited, and then I paid for
Okay,
I just got a lower price, and then I paid for the guy myself to come out and put a mitigation system in, which I did. And literally with the next test, it was below 1. It was like 0.5. So it was working, for sure it was working. And I can still hear the fan. It goes all the way up to my roof and out. It's like just a constant fan noise. Okay. Due diligence. Okay, so C, failure to cancel or resolve objections. Andrew.
All right. If buyer fails to cancel the REPC or fails to resolve in writing with seller any objections buyer has arising from buyer's due diligence, as provided in section 8.1b, buyer shall be deemed to have waived the due diligence condition and except as provided in section 8.2a and 8.3bi, the earnest money deposit shall become non-refundable.
So what does that say in layman's terms?
Earnest money is now non-refundable because of due diligence.
If
it goes past the deadline, you have waived your right
Yes,
to
if you say nothing,
cancel because of the due diligence.
you still have the appraisal and financing.
Yeah,
But
depending on
if
the-
they ask you why you're canceling, you say, well, the roof leaks.
No.
No, it's not valid anymore. So if our due diligence expiration was today and there was no time given, at what time does the due diligence expire?
5 p.m.
5 p.m. is the standard business time. Okay. Be careful of your dates too when you write contracts, because for your own convenience, say, does this contract or due diligence expire on a Monday or a Sunday?
Don't just go.
Unless you love to work on Sundays, don't put them as expiring on Sundays.
I had a guy we did the contract that night, and the next day was a Sunday. And he's like, oh yeah, expires Sunday the next day. I'm like, really? Thanks for like 2 minutes to get it all taken care of. He's like, oh yeah, sorry.
So as a listing agent, when you receive contracts, you can counter and just make some modifications. Not that you want more time, you just don't want things,
Rushed.
you don't want to be receiving addendums on Sundays that need signatures. Because what happens is that they're gonna be rushed. Statistically speaking, you're gonna be countering within a few days of that deadline. And it's just stress. Like, you don't need that. You don't need additional stress in real estate. Okay, it takes a lot of fun out of your life. and your kids are gonna ask you, why is Dad so mad or so serious or so gloom? Like, well, you're carrying a burden because you're carrying someone else's feelings, and they're intense because they're going through this for themselves, and it's pretty intense. That's why I knew I could never like be a counselor. It's like it's just too much. Like I can't handle that. But then I became a realtor and I'm a counselor. I'm helping my clients.
You were destined to get sucked in.
I'm helping my clients and I get sucked in, and I feel too much for them, which is the hard part. You feel for them and you want to help them, and but as a professional, you will get burned out if you get too involved into these things. And that's part of my learning process, is how to back off a little bit.
It's awful.
I ended up, when I was just starting out, it was one of my first deals, and she was basically gonna be homeless if she didn't close on this house. And I just was like doing any and everything to just get her in, because I knew she was gonna be homeless. And she tried to back out of the deal. I'm like, you can't back out of the deal. I ended up helping her move. I paid for the U-Haul trucks. I think I spent more money on her than I earned. Just trying to make the deal happen for her.
You're awesome, Carol.
And then she was gonna write Carol a bad review. You're like,
She, in the end, I think,
you can't help crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, they're in these positions because they have issues. And if you think you can resolve people's issues by giving them money or by doing things, you'll learn the hard way.
She was buying a $39,000 house out in Helper, Utah, cash. And we were arguing over $1,000. She wanted $1,000 off for leaks. Anyways, and I just finally said, well, if I help you move, then that'll save you the $1,000. So let's just sign it and be done.
I don't recommend that. I don't recommend you using your own money because,
Because you get burned.
well, you don't have enough money to help everybody. Just flat out, you just don't have enough money to help everybody. I mean, yeah, I've paid for cleaning. I've done a lot, but the main thing that you do is just give them a you, which is help them, and just do it.